Because at some point, we're all going to retract back into the source and be blissful unity until it happens all over again.
Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're here with Young Snow and we're going to be talking about the topic of surrender, starting by talking about the topic of surrender.
Yeah, and we were talking about surrendering to your higher self, the universe's will, what they call it, the great work.
Yeah, in magic they call it the great work.
Oh, that's strictly magic?
Yeah, the great work, crossing the abyss, crossing the expanse of suffering, getting free, becoming liberated.
Yeah, I had made a point earlier and I was talking about how like in order to reach your highest potential and surrender, you still have to work. You still have to put in energy. You still have to be disciplined and practice. And I feel like a big part of surrendering that people get confused is just like I used an analogy. I think it's called an analogy, a comparison. I used an analogy as like someone's not going to be living in their highest potential if they're surrendering and just like shooting up heroin every day. Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm surrendering to the universe. You still have to practice and be disciplined. And I feel like a big thing that I want people to know is like spiritual practice a little bit every day goes a long way. Severely.
Yeah. So I think good context for that would be with surrendering is because the concept of surrendering in self-work and self-discipline is like a context on where he's coming from, I guess you could say, is very important. And oftentimes what we were talking about earlier is it could be kind of misconstrued because in modern like self-help books, in modern spiritual teachings, it's often kind of shown like you're already perfect the way you are, or even saying you're already, like in Buddhism they might say you're already the Buddha, or they might say you're already God, or you're already the enlightened one. And what we were kind of trying to convey is like, while at the deepest level that's true, that we're like one with that source energy, there has to be some kind of effort, some kind of discipline, some kind of movement and practice to actually unite and feel like that. Like you said, like you can't just go around doing drugs or doing some whatever bad behavior, or anything, not even just a bad behavior, but just like saying like, oh, I'm one with the universe, and you don't do anything different and you're still like angry and miserable. So like sometimes that's a misconstrued I guess thing, you know. And it doesn't mean that you should be hard on yourself, like mean to yourself. It has nothing to do with like, I don't have any self-judgment or any self-criticism, but understanding that surrendering to the higher will, surrendering to the deepest nature requires really a tremendous amount of constant work and like observation and attention.
Yeah, exactly. I wish I don't remember exactly what I think I was reading the Kabbalion, the 7 Hermetic Principles, I think. No, it's not what I was reading. I don't know. I was either reading a book or watching a video, and the whole point of the video, I'm terrible at quotes, so I'm not even going to try to assassinate that, but the message that I was receiving, what the intent was although we come from divine creation, from the source, and although we are an aspect of that, we are not that entirely. That is us, but we are not that. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
We
yeah.
have the divine spark inside of us, which is essentially that it gives us the ability to be like God, as Jesus said in the Bible. But that doesn't mean we are God. we are aspects of God, but we are not entirely God, because there's Alpha and Omega. There's no beginning or end. It's God is infinite outside of time, and we are here inside of time. However, our consciousness is not bound by the time. Therefore, our consciousness is the divine spark that I was speaking of.
Well, that was some powerful stuff right there. No, really, but it's so true, you know. And it's like, can you hold both of those things like simultaneously?
Yeah, I mean, we do in everyday life by existing. The problem is that I think the New Age teachings, just like any other teachings, are quickly becoming distorted.
Yeah.
By media, through trends, through music, and you know, like I'm not, you know, it's kind of just like everyone's just running around thinking they're God, and everyone's running around being woke and playing with crystals, but like the knowledge is not being shared properly. Like the amount of people who are becoming spiritually adept, there is far less than is far less than the ratio of the amount of people aware of these concepts in general. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it seems like compared to 10 years ago, like it's it's almost household. I would say it's almost like household conversation. Spirituality is in these days.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like
Was
10
it
years,
before?
a decade ago, it was either Christianity or Muslim.
It's definitely seeping more and more into consciousness, like
Yeah.
where it's not that far out of a concept, like a lot of like great spiritual traditions and practices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what I think is not missing, but like you said, is kind of lost sometimes in the conveyance, is like the depth of them.
Yeah.
Like the depth of like what these traditions have to offer, and like what can be found, say, like if you were talking to a Zen master, or like a magician, like a master of magic, or a magus.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know the term. Or like a Hindu, like a Swami, or any tradition, or like a Christian mystic. What you would find in like talking to any very highly developed being in any tradition would be, one, that they probably put in huge amounts of like practice, study, and discipline into getting to where they're at, first of all, and probably cultivated great energetic, you know, practices to get them to where they are. Yeah. And then also that they would have a great understanding of these traditions. And like, I think for me, I know all of my consciousness, like all the spirituality I've developed, is like a result of the different beings and energies that I have connected with, that I've like studied, that have seeped into my being. And like the value I found in these traditions was a lot more than just what was on the surface. And what I was telling Snow earlier was like with a meditation group that I go to, and it's like, it could be a Buddhist meditation group, and you go and you get there and everybody says, well, you're already the Buddha, and it's cool to meditate, and if you want the religion or the spirituality, that's optional, but what's required is like, we really just want you to sit and meditate. Which from one aspect, it's like, that's cool. They want people to be there and feel comfortable, and if they don't buy into their tradition, they want them to be there. But I know they're missing so much, because a part of the consciousness of my meditation is built in with the studies and the understandings, say I have of Buddhism, about karma and about reincarnation and about suffering and about the higher planes, and all of these things are like about the Noble Eightfold Path are a part. So if somebody had just told me, sit down and follow your breath, and I had no structure or like study behind it, it would still benefit me like emotionally. It would still like probably make you calmer over time.
Definitely
and stuff.
relieve stress, and like those are like the basics though.
It would do the basics, but it wouldn't do like the real spiritual work.
Yeah.
To such a degree, I think.
Yeah. And with what you're saying, and what we're kind of talking about with the discipline and the surrender, it's like there is no point in this essentially but there is. It's like if you look at it as a whole, the point is to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the point, right? But like
elaborate.
I'm saying the point of like deep meditations and like mantras and like the studies that we study, the spiritual practices. I mean, like the point is to do it. Like it's not like a race. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not. There's no finish line. You know what I'm saying? But like, so I think a problem that should be addressed is how our generation views these topics. Our generation views these topics, these teachings and these studies and these traditions that are passed on, and there's new traditions and new studies, and we're in a very, very interesting point in time where the internet gives us access to all of the knowledge that people, 100 years ago, if they knew a fraction of what we knew, would be burned alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, that being said, it creates it creates like a sense of entitlement maybe, and amongst the masses, like a sense of entitlement where it's like, oh, we have the internet, and so I know 10 people who know all this shit about spiritual teachings and practices and methods, so since they know it, like I know it too because we have the internet. But that's not how that works. You get what I'm saying? That's what I want to stress. It's just like being being awake to these topics and being knowledgeable of these topics does not equate to having the study and the practice. You understand? Like,
yeah, I would love to say something about that.
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree because I see so much, like, even from my own being someone who shares a lot, like, because I like to use the word spirituality because it's broad, but like shares a lot of spiritual type stuff, whether like on here or with people I meet or like in communities with people. I think there's a huge tendency to lean to that where like you'll share something with somebody and they'll kind of just brush it off in the sense of like, oh yeah, I know about that, or like I heard about that, but they don't because there's no like depth or no practice or no like reality behind that for them. Well, what I was gonna say though is that in regards to what you said, no, it's important because like what I've realized more and more through the insight I've gained through like meditation and stuff, the reality of the amount of substantial difference it makes when you actually do some sort of daily practice or discipline, whether it's like yoga or tai chi or meditation or journaling or some type of ritual or like reading of text. But like the discipline really takes you through the doorway. Like really like knowing about prayer or whatever like is one thing, but if you go in prayer every day, like it really takes you through. And like what I became now is so much different than what I was before. And like how I live daily is like there's so much less suffering involved and so much more like compassion, peace, understanding, joy. And so sometimes it's like, well, yeah, of course I want to convey it to other beings, and that was another part of what I wanted to do in this video, was just show that like I've been realizing more and more, like leaning into we really do have the potential for like great amounts of bliss and happiness, and like not only can we be that, but when we become it, like our energy field changes and we can give it to others as well. But really showing each other that we have the potential to live in those states, because like
we absolutely do.
Yeah, because it's easy to get caught in like, I think from my own ego, like I can be okay with suffering, but it's been a long journey for me to with my own suffering. But sometimes we're like so caught in our habits and our like habitual like complaints and stuff, like to realize that wow, there really is a way you can be free of that. Like you can be blissful and like maybe not always stay in it, but you could stay in it. Like you could be in higher states, you don't have to like run the same cycles through forever. Like there doesn't always have to be a problem. You know, I realize like there's stuff I work on for sure, but there doesn't have to like always be a complaint. Like things could actually be okay, and like there's systematic ways of getting to different states where you could feel better. Like if you do sitting meditation 20 minutes a day, like if you sit down for 20 minutes a day,
it's life-changing, bro.
For 30 days, your whole life's going to be completely different than it was
life-changing.
The day before. Yeah.
Like literally life-changing. Just small acts. See, that's what I just wish, like, it's like trendy right now to be spiritual. It's like trendy, like, you know, trendy, like, you know, how like something will go viral and then it's like trendy. So a certain way people talk, certain words, catch me outside, how about that? Like that was trending for a while, you know? It was like spirituality has become a trend. And that's great in the sense of like, wow, like millions and millions and millions of people are being exposed to the true nature of reality through that. But at the same time, it's dangerous.
Well, I think the danger for a person, right, is that, and if you have a different idea you're getting at, but I think you can get taken through kind of like, there's no substitute for doing the work. So you could like go too quick ahead of where you actually are, kind of, and then it kind of leads to some sort of like disaster because like you kind of could think you're higher or more ahead, like in that sense spiritually than you are, and then like there's really a bunch of work that still has to be done, and it could kind of lead to some kind of suffering, or like you go ahead of where you are and next thing you know it's like you're like doing heavy drug use again or acting out like gambling or something because you weren't ready to be where you were at.
I'm not gonna.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That leads me to a separate point that I wanted to ask you while we're here in front of our kind audience, our lovely audience. What are your thoughts on monotheism being the predominant form of spiritual practice in modern day and age?
Ooh, that's a tough question to tackle. Well, I don't know if it's modern day and age everywhere, but I would say definitely in the West, because it definitely is monotheism, like meaning the belief in one God, which is the primary tenets of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and I'm sure other sects as well, but like not so much in some of the Eastern traditions that don't really have that same idea and focus. I think like in Judaism where it says like, hail, O Lord, like the Lord our God is one, or whatever. Well, I think it's this. I think that ultimately those point to the truth if interpreted the right way, that like there's this one everything. Like, and you can call it one in the sense that like it can't be called anything, and it's just the one of everything, and that we're all that same one. But how I think the misinterpretation is it becomes looked at as there's one God in the sense of one deity that's like running the whole show, which was actually not only is that not conveyed in Eastern texts, that actually isn't even conveyed in the Bible or the Old Testament, the Western text. It was just kind of changed into that. So I think it is misleading in that sense.
Yeah. Because
when I got in deep into the studies of like Hinduism and Buddhism, and especially Hinduism, and seeing that like their philosophy and understanding was like, hey, there's like massive amounts of beings all over the universe. Like, do you not understand? Basically, their texts were saying like, you got to understand like how exquisite this whole thing is. Like, just like there's us, like there's beings everywhere that could be called gods, that could be creating universes, that could be like anything, but they're all still part of the one. So you can call them the one in that way, but yet you can connect with them all, just like how I can connect with you, or like I could connect with Kali or Christ or whoever, or Krishna, just like how I'm connecting with somebody here, because those are real. They're just as real as I am, basically, is what I'm saying. Like, they're
Right.
just as there. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that would be what I would, before you, say your comments. I guess that, yeah, just that, for me, having that understanding has greatly, like, increased the scope of my own spirituality.
Yeah, and that leads me back to like our initial topic of like surrendering and being your highest self. Like in many traditions, it's pretty much taught that like you can. I mean, the teachings of Jesus himself were trying to teach you that you can be like God, and when it's said like that, like we can all be like deities. We can all become deities. All of us have that potential. But that's our whole point, is like you can't just be a fuck every day and expect to become a deity. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna reincarnate at best as a human again. At best. Like at worst, there's lower dimensions. You come back as like a fucking caterpillar or some shit.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's really not funny.
It's comical in the sense of no matter what, everything's going to be fun. Because at some point, we're all going to retract back into the source and be blissful unity until it happens all over again.
Yeah. That's the whole thing, is like holding those two perspectives, but realizing the first one's also real. Like, because the real truth is like what you said. Is that it's all okay and we're all part of the one, and like it's all gonna be fine, and it always was, and like none of the suffering really happened. But the more relative part is that like we're here and it seems real, and like even though this falls all an illusion, just like this is an illusion, but we're still here.
Right.
So is the different planes of reality and the rebirth and all that. Like
Planes of reality?
is also illusion, but is also still here. So like you could be a really bad person or a really good person, and like you're gonna reap those results, and they're gonna seem just as real as this is. So I guess that's important to see that like there really is like karma's a real thing. There is because there's definitely a misinterpretation around karma. Not that it's completely wrong, because in its essence, the word karma does mean action, and a lot of times it's thought of like, well, if I hit you, something bad's gonna happen to me.
Right.
Which in essence isn't completely wrong. A lot of times people don't believe in karma because they say good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, but they don't see that your karma really is a continuing psychic DNA code that carries with your spirit through lifetime. So it doesn't necessarily have to... Sure. Your karma is manifesting all the time. Literally who you are right now and what you're doing right now is your karma playing out. So like everybody's living their karma all the time.
Right.
Like whatever I previously did is how I'm in this exact position in this moment. Like that's my karma. So it is an ongoing chain, but it is important. Like, and Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Buddhist monk who just died, said in his book Fear, like he says that's all you take with you when you die is like the results of your intentions and your acts. Like that's your will that takes you on.
Right. So what's going on, man? What are we doing here? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think the best thing for any person that's trying to make any change is like to find some kind of community or some kind of set of people or set of teachings or something that they to open to your heart. You open to your heart, and if you have the desire and you have the intention, like the right things, like the next message is always right where you're at. So like say you were watching something like this, like you wouldn't even be listening at this point still if there wasn't something that some reason and purpose for you to be there. Like you would have turned it off or you never would have came across it. So like that would be your next message. So for anybody at any time, it's like wherever you're at is your next message, and depending on the depth of your, like, in the profundity of your desire and your longing, like that's how much is going to manifest. Because you could only do a little bit of work, and like that's okay. Like some people in a lifetime, they're like, well, I'm just going to do this little bit and like help my consciousness a little, and like that's all I got this lifetime. Like that's what I'm going to do. And some people are like, okay, I don't believe in that, I'm not gonna do anything. And some people, they see it so clearly that like the fire awakens in them, and they're like, well, I might as well get on with this and like start doing this work on myself, because I've been on this wheel for so long. It's about time I like, make some progress. And really, and it said this in Buddhism, that like a human birth is very precious, and in the yogic philosophies, but like a human birth gives you a ton of potential to develop your awareness, like the consciousness of your soul, where like you don't always have that. Like if you're, like my dogs are outside, like in a dog birth, you don't have as much potential.
Yeah.
Because your mind is below the level of mind, so like you can't be cognizant, you can't like really work on yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. So dogs are pretty much fucked.
Well, they say in the Buddhist text, like that's why you don't want to go down to an animal realm, because once having been there, it's untold how long it can take to get out, because your development is like nothing.
Our boy P-Raz can be straight.
But the good thing is that, well, that's not really the good thing, but it's also said, which makes perfect sense to me, although it might sound a little far out, is like if animals are with more conscious beings, which really makes perfect sense, because like your energy field affects those around you. If they're with more conscious beings, it's going to be beneficial to them. So like it's going to be good. It's good for your animals to be around you if you're a conscious person, because it'll help them. And I guess we should probably not go for too much longer, but a few things I wanted to say that this will lead into perfectly. Because, we were kind of talking about some far out things, but it's it makes sense to who it's supposed to make sense to. And it's like, it's an interesting thing, because once your insight kind of sees all that and perceives it, it's like, you can't really pretend you don't, because you just know. And then once you know, it's like you just know, and that's just how it is, And I think that has seeped into consciousness way more, where there's way more people that just know than like previously.
Yeah.
Because what would happen is like these people like Christ and many others, but I'll just use like the heads of these traditions, like Christ or like Buddha, like they go to these super deep mystical places, and then they come back and like tell people about it. And then they have this huge energetic like force that creates a whole religious tradition behind it. But the people in the tradition don't realize that like you can get what the being themselves got, and like that's what they were trying to convey.
Yeah.
Like, and some do, like in Buddhism, like that's basically what the Buddha said. He was basically like, do it yourself and like figure this out. But that, it kind of gets like the church makes it so it's like, okay, just listen to this and like put your faith here. But like what he was really, like he said, Jesus, I'm pointing because I have a poster of Jesus there, but he said like, haven't I said, didn't it say in the Old Testament, like you're all gods and all children of the Most High? Like he said things like that. Like,
well,
he was telling people that.
Unfortunately, through the mistranslations of the Bible, not everyone even knows that. And that was one thing that I wanted to kind of say too, was I wonder, like you said, like if you're meant to be watching this, you're meant to be hearing this, then here we are. But at the same time, I do wonder, like do people just think we're just like, I'm not saying people think about us in particular. My question is do people who are very developed in their studies and know what's going on, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about people who aren't developed in their studies but has sparked curiosity into these topics. Do they think that, like, what do you think they think that we just have read like a couple articles on the internet and have watched a YouTube video or two? Like what I'm saying is, I don't think they realize like you and I have been studying this for like pushing on a decade, you know what I'm saying? Teachings have been taught for like very long amounts of time through extremely amounts of respectable people, and that's what my point was. Is like, I feel like people may not understand the benefits that come with the actual studies and practices, as opposed to just like the concepts of these things. Like conceptually, let's say like conceptually I'm a practicing musician, I practice magic. Now like, okay, there's levels to it, you know what I'm saying? Like there's the basic shit that everyone knows about, like tarot cards and Ouija boards and crystals. Like sure, you can play with that your whole entire life, and like there's many benefits to those things. But now what happens if you start reading crazy books like that tell you how to like astral project and teach you about the etheric realm and the astral realm and the mental plane, the hermetic principles, you know, stuff like that. Like the benefits of me having acquired that knowledge and studying it in life are unparalleled to anything else I've ever studied in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The information is definitely no, I'm following you. It's definitely there. Like I have a good example that might be similar to what you're saying. Like in the like I made a video once on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is like a great book. It's called
I watched that one.
Liberation. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you sent it to me.
It's called like Liberation Through Hearing, and it was made by by like lamas in the mountains of Tibet, very high beings. It was actually written by Padmasan Baba, who like brought Buddhism to Tibet, and it was for beings to die and like how they cross the after death realms and stuff like that. And I remember somebody that I knew saying something like, "Oh my God, like you're like." You gotta calm down with that. Like we have to have a talk. Like I was acting crazy or something.
Yeah.
When it was like, really, this is like ancient wisdom traditions that have been brought down since before the time of Christ, like thousands and thousands of years back by beings that like went to these places and like understood these things themselves and like conveyed it down through time and wrote it for other beings to understand. And like they were people just like me and you, like just like us, that like human that did the stuff and figured out the stuff, and they were like, wow, it's not like you think it is at all. And so like it's easy to hear stuff like that and dismiss it and just be like, oh well, that's interesting to contemplate, or like that's cool food for thought, and then you just kind of like don't do anything and forget about it.
And you go back to your programmed monotheistic way of thinking, and it's just simply not in your paradigm. That's all I want. Just open your mind to the possibility that maybe it's a polytheistic world we're living in. Hey, polytheism is your world. We're just living in it.
And you know, yeah. And the thing about anything is like, you could just not do anything, and then you'll just die eventually anyway, and we'll still be here, and you'll still be there, and you'll realize that you were there the whole time, and you were just kind of like deluding yourself, and then you'll figure that out when you die anyway, and then probably still be in delusion to a certain extent, but yeah. So I guess what I was gonna say that I missed out on before we finish, and then if you have anything else to finish that, like I think what he was trying to convey, there's really a science behind all spirituality, like in all energetics. Like I'm in Kundalini yoga teacher training. If you read the Kundalini yoga teacher's manual, like it takes you through the entire science of like the chakra energy system, like of the soul, of matter, of the different tendencies of mind, of how all these things work on your aura and your magnetic field. But these places are they're not a mystery. Like they're mapped and they're charted and they're plotted out, and like there's plenty of I never give any recommendations over like a thing in the sense of like you should do this method, or like you should read this or whatever, because me myself, I'm so open and broad, and I trust that like there is so much. And like you were saying earlier, 500 years ago, if you wanted to learn something, like you would have to travel like 1,000 miles and like go live in a monastery and give your life away and this and that, like for these certain teachings, like just to get access to books and stuff, where now you have access to like all of it at any time, always. So it's really like a great potential for self-development if you're willing to do that.
I always say this: if you know, you don't have to ask, and if you have to ask, you don't need to know. And it's a son of a bitch philosophy, but that's occultism for you.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Is that all you got?
Yeah, time is man's greatest antagonist too.
All right, thanks for joining us. Thank you for letting us share with you on this talk, and I'll be back soon.
Peace be with you.